Thank you all for joining us tonight. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet, I'm Megan Doherty, the director of the Museum of the White Mountains. And wherever you are tonight, we are all on indigenous lands. And I wanted to share some resources in the chat. So these are 3 links where you can find out more information about the indigenous communities in your area. And if, like me, you're in central New Hampshire right now, or if you're in sort of any part of the state, so the first link is a kind of North American map resource. And then the second 2 are more local to us here in New Hampshire. So the first is a project sort of centered in southwestern New Hampshire called Abenaki Trails. And then the other is a group that's kind of based more in the Seacoast area called the Indigenous New Hampshire Collaborative Collective. You can go ahead, there's lots of resources on there. You can find out more about the work that they're doing, as well as lots of teaching resources on there as well. So I am delighted tonight to be joined by Lindsey Rustad. I've had the great pleasure over the last few months of talking with her about Hubbard Brook and the art science program. And I know that we're all going to have a really wonderful time learning from her tonight. So thank you, Lindsey, for joining us.
Hey, well, it's really great to be here and super to see some familiar faces out there, and obviously lots of new faces as well. So good evening. Thanks for being here tonight on this dark, dark night. We're still getting used to the change in the light. But thank you so much to Megan for inviting me, and also Megan for all your great work and inspiration on the upcoming exhibit on Field Station Art Science in the White Mountains. I am so excited that it opens this weekend, and I cannot wait to go see it. So I wanted to start by saying that it has really been one of the highlights of my career to work at the confluence of science, art, and music. And that over the last 10 years, I've had the honor to help launch the Hubbard Brook Art Sci program. And I just wanted to share that we started this journey back in 2012 with what we thought it was just the germ of an idea. And that idea was that as the world was becoming increasingly complex, and as social and ecological issues were becoming increasingly intertwined, there was a need to have more diverse voices at the table so that together we could tackle some of the large issues that were coming down the road. So again, a decade ago, our simple goal, or again, our germ of an idea, was that the scientists at Hubbard Brook would begin to better interact with artists. And that over the course of time, and years to decades were okay with us. We do long-term studies, so that was fine. But it would be the expectation and not the exception that there would be artists in the forests at the table and contributing to our dialogues. And that together, artists and scientists, we would broaden our exploration of science and society at this really unique research site. And I am thrilled to report that we've made great progress on this as a growing cadre of artists begin to call Hubbard Brook their muse, their inspiration, and even their professional home. So tonight, I don't plan to speak for all of them. I'm going to let them do that through the exhibit and through their own online talks. But rather, I wanted to give you my own perspective on why the integration of science and art is important right now. And then I wanted to share a project called the Water Viz as a case study of how some of us have gone about this integration. So tonight, I'm going to cover 4 different areas. The first is shifts in ecology and society, at least what I have witnessed in my lifetime. The second is a discussion of where science meets art. The third is the Water Viz, or a real-world example of how we go about integrating science and art. And the fourth, of course, is a shout out to the upcoming exhibit on Field Station Art Science in the White Mountains. So I want to tell you just a little bit more about myself. Some of you guys out there know me. First of all, I'm not an artist, but I love art. I am not a musician, but I love music. What I am is a scientist. I am a forest ecologist with the USDA Forest Service, and I've spent the better part of the last 4 decades trying to figure out what makes northern forests tick, and particularly how they respond to and recover from large-scale disturbances like air pollution, climate change, and extreme weather events. The tools of my trade, my brushes and notes, you could say, include evaluating pattern and process at long-term studies, conducting large-scale outdoor field manipulation experiments, synthesizing data from sites and experiments across really the world, creating networks of scientists from different disciplines to tackle a common problem, and more recently, art-science collaborations. And the thread that connects all of these with me and also the folks that I work with, I think is a curiosity to better understand the inner workings of the forest and how those affect the world in which we live. So, that world we live in is undergoing major shifts. And speaking for myself, over the 40 years of my career and the 60 plus years of my life, I have witnessed some remarkable societal and environmental shifts. So just to touch on a few, if you look up here in the upper left, we look at some shifts in society on the negative or maybe the challenging side. In my lifetime, the Earth's population has increased from 3 to 8 billion people. I had to check that number a couple of times. In my lifetime, the percent of the world's population living in urban areas has increased from 34 to over 55%. And in my lifetime, the indices of economic inequality have risen such that now the richest 1% of the world's population owns over 50% of its net worth. On the societal positive side, though, in my lifetime, we've had tremendous increases in computing power as a metric of technology. It has increased exponentially. We call it by Moore's Law since the 1950s. In my lifetime, the Internet of Everything is revolutionizing our lives. And in my lifetime, there has been significant increases in gender, ethnic, and sexual orientation equality. It's been quite amazing, and we hope we don't go backwards. On the environmental positive side, again, in my lifetime, I've witnessed that acid rain has been reduced dramatically by over 80% in the US and Western Europe. In my lifetime, lead has been removed from gasoline, and DDT, many other pesticides and chlorofluorocarbons have been banned. On the environmental negative side, however, atmospheric CO2 has increased by over 30%. Mean global temperatures have increased by nearly 1 degree C. Precipitation has become more variable, leaving some areas with little to no precipitation and others with way too much. And of course, as we've all seen, the frequency and severity of extreme weather events has increased. Professionally, over the course of my career, there's been a major shift in a focus from studying ecology alone or society alone to studying the interactions between ecology and society. And sometimes these interactions lead to tension. And let me give you 2 examples. So on the one hand, right, there's an increasing need to provide a growing world population, that 8 billion people we talked about, with food, water, fiber, and minerals. On the other hand, we need to maintain the extent, health, and vitality of really the finite natural systems that produce that very food, water, fiber, and minerals that we need to survive. So on one hand, we need to extract the resources. On the other hand, we need to protect the resources. Another example, on the one hand, we have indisputable evidence of the increasing ecological and societal risks of a rapidly changing global climate. On the other hand, action to combat this global threat requires fundamental shifts in behavior and technologies relative to energy consumption, some of which we don't really want to adopt. So the consequences of a failure to address these tensions or challenges in a timely fashion, or what I call the speed of need, range from a disruption, degradation, and loss of natural ecosystems like the loss of our magnificent coral reefs, and increasing social inequities and injustice, where the poorest populations and nations seem to be at greatest risk from a changing climate, to social unrest and wars. This is a photo I took in a pre-COVID meeting, and it's where we were hearing about how extreme events could lead to crop failure, could lead to famine, could lead to social unrest, could lead to war. Similar sentiments are being echoed in an increasing number of journal articles, like this recent one in Nature titled "Climate as a Risk Factor for Armed Conflict." Given these combined threats, human societies are faced with increasingly complex socio-ecological challenges, which are being compounded at sometimes dizzyingly fast paces and can lead to an existential unease and crisis. Many of us feel that, many of our kids and grandkids feel that. So how do we address this? During the 20th century, when I came of age, a paradigm emerged to increasingly rely on science, and science alone, to provide solutions to global issues. Science, after all, allowed us to put a man on the moon, to split atoms, to solve the riddle of DNA, that is life, and gave us the Green Revolution. But at the same time, during the 20th century, the role of the arts and humanities, which have been intertwined with science since the time of the ancient Greeks, they have been marginalized or outright ignored. And it is this marginalization process, and in this process, we have lost something profound, because although science can provide powerful insights on how humans impact the natural world, the arts and humanities imbue that knowledge with empathy, engagement, and a deeper level of understanding. As we race through the 21st century, an emerging need exists to shift this 20th century science-dominated paradigm, not by ignoring science, which of course some people are doing, but by revitalizing genuine relationships between the arts, that's the arts writ large, and sciences, with the goal to bring together the combined expertise of these diverse disciplines to create a more unified approach to solving the interconnected ecological and social issues of the 21st century. Another way to look at this is the knowledge value action chain. I first came across this in 2015 in a talk by Jerry Schubel, who's a fellow at the National Academy of Sciences. And it kind of goes like this. So we scientists do a great job, as I just showed you, by creating facts and using science to generate understanding from those facts. However, it's the arts, humanities that generate empathy from that understanding. It is empathy that ultimately generates action. I think an example of this is the work of Rachel Carson, who as a scientist had huge command of facts and understanding, but as a gifted writer, right? She was able to create empathy in her brilliant work, Silent Spring, which eventually led to action and the ban of DDT and other pesticides, not to mention the launch of the environmental movement. So we scientists often want to go straight from facts and understanding to action, and we often fail when we do this. And I hate to say it, but climate change is probably a good example. Another arrow that I want to add to Jerry's diagram, and which I'm going to talk about in great detail today, is the direct role of the arts in creating understanding from facts. So in sum, I'd like to just say two things. And one is that we really need to integrate the art with science to help people see, understand, and emphasize with facts so they can enact change. And two, we can use art to actually help make sense out of facts to advance knowledge and understanding. So that's a lot of kind of big words and kind of thinking kind of outside kind of the direct realm. And people always say, well, Lindsey, that's all great, but how do we do that? So I'm going to spend the next part of this talk sharing with you one project called the WaterBiz, where we've tried to do this. And when I say we, I really mean we, because this list here on the right-hand side just shows all the people that are involved in this project: scientists and artists and IT experts and educators and others. This was a big project that took a large amount of people, and I am grateful to every single one of them. So our big idea was that the process of engaging artists in all phases of the scientific study will stimulate new ideas and insights to better address 21st century socio-ecological problems, kind of what I was saying before. We also wanted in this project to build on innovation, including a new generation of environmental sensors, a new generation of digital media, including data visualization and sonification techniques, and new insights and tools from neuroscientists. Our overarching goals were to, 1, foster intellectual engagement between artists and scientists, and 2, maybe most importantly, is harness these engagements to fuel innovation and to share science with a broader audience. The work is built on 3 assumptions. The first assumption is that we can conduct what I think of as a soft hijack of the brain, if you will, that by simultaneously engaging the reasoning, auditory, and visual centers of the brain, we can make pattern and process in large ecological data sets easier to intuit. The second assumption is that neurobiological tools and theory can provide a mechanistic basis for this increased understanding of pattern and process. And the third assumption is that the very process of engaging artists and scientists from different disciplines in real-world projects will stimulate new insights to better address complex environmental problems. So, to tell you more, I have to take you from wherever you are to the Hubbard Brook Experimental Forest in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. If you were all in the room, I would say, raise your hand if you've been to Hubbard Brook. Raise your hand if you'd like to be at Hubbard Brook. You're all welcome to come visit us at Hubbard Brook. So Hubbard Brook is an experimental forest. It's operated by the USDA Forest Service. It was established in the mid-1950s as a center for hydrologic research for the region, and it has since grown to be arguably one of the most important long-term ecological research sites in the world. It is an approximately 8,000 acre valley. It's about 5 miles long, 3 miles wide, and it's drained by a series of first, second, third order streams. And as I said, it's located in the rugged and scenic White Mountains of New Hampshire, which you can see here from an eagle's eye view. Obviously, that was a month or so ago. All those leaves are now gone. We're waiting for the snow. Scientists at Hubbard Brook have been studying the forest and the water cycle for over 60 years. Research highlights include the discovery of acid rain, the responsive forest to whole tree harvest, some of the longest running migratory bird studies in the world, and the impacts of climate change and extreme weather events on our eastern northern hardwood forests. More recently, Hubbard Brook scientists have been deploying a new generation of environmental sensors that can monitor the major components of the water cycle in real time. These new sensors currently gather over 100,000 data points per day at Hubbard Brook and over 40 million data points per year. These high-frequency data are providing the foundation of a new era of research and discovery at Hubbard Brook, and they're also providing new ways to rapidly communicate Hubbard Brook data to the public. So, as you can imagine, our first impulse as scientists was to create dozens, if not hundreds, of charts and graphs. But we soon realized that these were not being effective at communicating our science to the public. And even our own brains, right, felt like they were going to explode with the magnitude of data we were generating. So, we decided to crumple that up and regroup. And instead of connecting our data to traditional scientific charts and graphs, we decided to connect the very same data to artistic data visualizations and musical data sonifications in the WaterViz. So let me tell you how this works. In a nutshell, we collect high frequency data on all components of the water cycle from a small catchment on the south-facing slopes up at Hubbard Brook. These data are then bounced around the watershed using high-frequency radios, and they end up on a computer at our base station at headquarters. And from here, they're sent to the internet, where they power near real-time data dashboards and simultaneously the WaterViz, or a real-time data visualization and sonification. So I'd like to explain what you're looking at, but first I want to introduce you to our artist, Xavier Cortada. Xavier is a visual artist who translates science into art, amongst many other amazing things. And if you know Xavier's bold and colorful work, you will instantly recognize the WaterViz as an original Xavier Cortada. So back in 2013, we asked Xavier to create a piece of visual art with different sections to represent discrete parts of the water cycle. And these sections are then animated with moving particles, such that the number of particles and the speed with which they travel are directly proportional to and actually driven by the data generated from those sensors I was telling you about. You can see here the different sections. Stream flow is at the bottom with particles moving from left to right. Soil water is slightly above, as if you were looking at the bank of a stream. We have wavy particles float down from the top to the bottom in this section, which is soil water. Snow, when it's present, sits on top of the soil as a white layer. Evaporation and transpiration can be seen as white and green mist rising from the surface, and precipitation can be seen as rain or snow particles moving from the top through the forest and into the stream. The only number in the visualization is actually stream flow, which is down here at the bottom, is cubic feet per second. And this is in a V, which signifies a V-notch weir. For those of you who are familiar with Hubbard Brook, that's how we measure stream flow. So let's watch this in action for just a minute. So a unique component of the WaterViz is what we call listen in, where the same Hubbard Brook data have been sonified. And a sonification is the acoustic version of a data visualization. And here our data have been connected to pitch, timing, timbre, as played by different instruments, allowing the listener to hear multiple lines of data in complex dimensions. Sonifications engage different parts of our brains, right, than the visual and reasoning centers, making scientific data available in new ways. And this is uniquely true for the visually impaired. And that's a topic for a whole nother talk. But at the WaterViz, we have 3 different ways to listen in. We have the music library, music now, and look and listen. But before I describe these components, I want to introduce you to the musician, Marty Quinn. Marty is a musician, composer, dancer, and computer scientist extraordinaire. His work includes things like Tides of Venice, Deep Space Image Music, Walk on the Sun, Seismic Sonata. I think you get the idea. And in this next clip I'm going to show you, Marty is going to tell you in his own words how the WaterViz sonification works.
In a process I call musically encoded sonification, one can perceive the environmental and climate change over many years as a kind of forest symphony. In the music, we hear 6 different data variables. Each type of variable is represented by a different musical instrument or combination of instrument. The stream flow is the low bass. Precipitation events are a symbol that comes and goes. There's a precipitation event. There's the temperature, the flute going up and down. And the soil, the amount of water in the soil is the guitar.
You can see that Marty loves this work. So if we go back to our listen in pages, we can look at the music library, and here we have 5 years of musically encoded data. We're working on bringing this up to date to 2022, and you can listen to each individual year or to all of them combined. And so here, if we want to listen very quickly to 2012, I can turn this on. The next one in the middle here is the Music Now radio station. You can tune in anywhere, anytime to Hubbard Brook. And this one sonifies the last hour of real-time data. This is what you'll see on the website. And we can listen in. It's a slightly different arrangement. And then the one on the left is where we combine the visualization and the sonification in what we call look and listen. And people say to me, Lindsay, that's all great, but it's just a cacophony. I can't pick anything out. And what is this doing? It sounds beautiful, but how do I understand this? So I'm going to try and help you out. And I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to play the whole instrument ensemble and then break it down instrument by instrument. And then, because some of you are data scientists out there, I will also share the data graphs at the same time as the visualization and the sonification, help train your brain in listening. So all of these are from a 2-week rainy period in July of 2018. So first, here are all three together. So let's just look and listen for a minute. And I apologize if that line is not moving for you. Sometimes in Zoom it moves, sometimes it doesn't, but I think you get the sense of it. So now we'll go instrument by instrument. So to start, here's a short clip, video, and graph of just precipitation, which are the symbols. And here is a short clip, video, and graph of just stream flow as bass guitar and French horn. And here is a short clip, video, and graph of just soil water as guitar. And here's a short clip, video, and graph of evapotranspiration as marimbas. And finally, my favorite, a short clip, video, and graph of just temperature as flute. So now you can perhaps put it all back together as the full symphony. So let's listen in to that one last time. Takes a while to train your ear, but after a while you can indeed hear the data as the music is playing. So the next question is whether these new visualizations and sonifications lead to better memory or better understanding of the data. And I have to say, I almost took this part out an hour ago because I was thinking, oh my God, everybody's going to be too tired. No one's going to stay for all of this. And I thought some of you might be interested in some of the neuroscience behind this. So here goes. So to talk about the neuroscience, I have to introduce you to the neuroscientist, Michael Casey. Michael is a professor of art, music, and neuroscience at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, and his work includes music theory, music cognition, and neuroscience. And Michael works with the emerging field of neurological rewards. And research in this field reveals that people evaluate products more positively when they're physically associated with art images compared to non-art images. So what does that mean? For example, here's an image of a street light at night, right? Kind of boring. But here's an artistic version of a street light at night and a little bit more exciting. And maybe you can feel a little bit different response in your brain. Here's a photo of a man holding up his hands, maybe to focus on something kind of interesting. But here is a dramatic painting of a man holding up his hands. Again, if you're sitting in a quiet room, you might feel the difference. Neuroscientists can actually measure this difference in response and activation of different parts of the brain, which is kind of cool. So scientific data are complex, but we regularly extract, and if read is there, abstract, right, information on pattern and process from these complex data. We use images, which we typically use graphs. Our question that we posed to Michael was whether we could reimagine our scientific data as visualizations and sonifications so they could better activate the pleasure centers of the brain to improve interest, memory, and creativity. It was and still is quite the frontier, and we have not figured it out. So we haven't cracked this nut, but we've made some progress and we have posed a heck of a lot of questions. But for fun, you can see artist Xavier Cortada in Michael's lab. Again, that interaction of scientists and artists. And he's sporting a new low-cost brain scanner that was developed for this project. And he's engaged in creative work, which is captured on the brain scan to the right of your screen. So lots more to do here, so stay tuned. So the last topic I want to cover is how art can inform science. This is super important to me as a scientist. I feel really strongly about this. My discussions in the field with artists have really made me think more deeply about my science. But for this part of the talk, I'm going to go back to Marty Quinn. And in Marty's spare time, he created another data visualization in sonification, which he called the hydroscape. And I don't have time to go into this in detail, but if we zoom into this version, the colored bars depict wind direction over time. And Marty noticed a regular diurnal or 24-hour cycle pattern in wind direction. And if we go back to the data, we have indirect wind direction on the y-axis, time on the x-axis, and you can see that there are these rapid switches in wind direction, and they correspond to mountain valley breezes. And this shows that it's a pattern of wind flowing down the valley at night, right? When that cold air is sinking, it's going from north-northwest to south-southeast. Sun comes up in the morning, it warms the air mass and it goes back up the valley. Sun goes down, it goes back down the valley. So it's switching up and down as the air mass is warm and cool. These types of mountain valley breezes, again, they're called katabatic breezes. They're not unknown, but we didn't know how common they were in the Hubbard Brook Valley, kind of until we saw just the graphs, the colored graphs over time. So these are ecologically interesting because they cause the valley to be bathed in air masses on an almost daily basis, kind of like a tide coming in and going out. Dr. Eric Kelsey, he's not on tonight, but he works at Plymouth State University in the Mount Washington Observatory. He's also been working on these patterns. And in fact, there's a whole research program on katabatic breezes at the Hubbard Brook Valley now and elsewhere based on Dr. Kelsey's work, but also some of Marty's work. So to wrap up and revisit our assumptions, our first assumption was that multisensory experiences would make pattern and process in large ecological data sets easier to intuit. And we have some evidence, including the work on wind by Marty, suggesting that this can be true. The second assumption was that neurobiological tools could provide a mechanistic basis for this increased understanding. And we have some early intriguing results from Michael, but there's a lot of work to do in this area. The third assumption was that the very process of engaging artists and scientists from different disciplines in real-world projects could stimulate new insights or to better address those complex social and ecological problems that we talked about before. And only time will tell what we will learn from that part of this grand experiment. However, I can tell you that we've learned already that this work is a powerful tool to stimulate community engagement and to stimulate connections between people and the forest. Over the years, our WaterViz team has been invited to art shows, to art-size sessions at science meetings, to education conferences, and it's been featured in print and social media worldwide. People are curious, they're engaged, and they usually want to know more. So I'm going to end this section on my work, my team's work, by revisiting my original 2 points. The first, that we propose that there's a 21st century need to better integrate art with science to help people see and empathize with facts so they will enact change. And 2, we suggest that we can integrate art with science to further create knowledge and stimulate understanding. And I'd like to bookend my talk with an introduction to the upcoming exhibit, Field Station, Art Science in the White Mountains. And I want to say that the WaterViz is just one art-sci project at Hubbard Brook, of which there are now many. And they are all featured in this really cool new exhibit. And I just want to give you a teaser, which is a little bit of a timeline of the work and some of the artists, starting back in 2012 and going all the way through the present. So if you go back to 2012, when we were first getting started, Xavier Cortada joined us on a participatory art project that we called Wind Words. By 2013 and 2014, we were deep into the WaterViz project with both Xavier and Marty and a host of others that I showed you in that original graph. By 2015, Xavier was now teaming up with other scientists, including Mark Green, on things like the water painting project, also a bird project. In 2019 and 2020, we took a deep dive below ground. We welcomed artist Nikki Lint, seen here in the lower photo, who developed an acoustical exploration of below ground sound, while elsewhere in the forest, artist Rebecca Schultz, shown here in the upper photo, dug even deeper into the soil with geologist Scott Bailey, creating etchings and paintings of the local geology. In 2021, artist Reza Kakmarek joined us to work with many of the scientists at Hubbard Brook to create an amazing mural of Hubbard Brook, and it hangs now in the atrium of what we call our headquarters building. And she embedded it with the iconic plants and animals and soils and waters that are so dear to many of us in the forest. And not to be disrespectful, but it's kind of a Finding Waldo of your favorite science themes at Hubbard Brook. And then finally, most recently, artist Rita Leduc and scientist philosopher Rich Blundell. I have to say it, they burst on the scene as they started their own journey of exploration of the forest and its overt and hidden meanings. So all have had unique experiences in the forest, but all combine a close integration between science and art, and also between scientists and artists. And so I welcome you all to stop by the Museum of the White Mountains, either for the great opening of the Field Station exhibit this Saturday from 4 to 6 on November 19th, or anytime between then and February 11th, 2023. I'm sure Megan will tell you a little bit more about this. So there is a lot to see and to hear at this exhibit. And so with that, I really thank you for your time. I'm happy to take any questions. And I haven't really told you, the WaterViz is available online. You can find it at www.waterviz.org. I hope you'll check it out. And with that, I'm going to try and find the screen that says stop sharing.
Stop share. Oh, excellent.
I do learn.
No doubt. That's very clear. Thank you so much, Lindsey. That was wonderful. I have many questions, despite the many hours we've spent talking over the last few months. But before I dive into my own questions, I want to open it up to our audience. We have a fairly small group, so if you want to unmute to ask your question, you're welcome to, or if you want to put it in the chat, I'm happy to read them out. Either way, but thank you, Lindsey. While people gather their questions, thank you so much. That was really wonderful.
So that was great, Lindsey. It's just like I had seen some of this a couple of years ago and thought it was cool. And obviously this is really expanded. So in the work that's happening now with these other artists, they're each working with individual scientists or group of scientists and trying to find other ways to visualize their data as well.
I think each group, each artist is working, and the goal is to have not just working side by side, not working in silos, but working genuinely, having conversations, being in the forest, looking at the processes, having these relationships with scientists. So every single one of our artists, is working closely with one or more scientists.
Cool.
And that I just can't even say how much that benefits, not only the artists, but the scientists. I can't even tell you how many times, not just me saying this, but be out in the forest, and we'll be with someone, we'll be looking at something, and, we're like really cocky and we think we know everything, right? And they, we ask questions, and all of a sudden we realize we really don't know it as well as we thought, when we look at it through a different lens. I mean, it's really been a great experience. And humbling experience in some cases.
It's really cool. And how are you finding the artists that are interested in this kind of work?
That's a really great question. It's been somewhat serendipity over the last 10 years that they have either reached out to us because they've heard about our work, or we've heard of them and reached out to them. One of the things that we're planning with this exhibit is we're inviting artists and scientists and other thinkers to Hubbard Brook for a 2-day workshop. Want to think about what we've done. We want to think about, writing up why we think it's important. And then we need to think strategically about where we're going, as this program matures. So ideas are welcome. We haven't done, calls for artists. It hasn't been formalized. It's been, fairly organic so far, but we'd like to grow the program and, think about how we would do that. And what is our particular niche, right, in this world? And I don't have the answer to that, but I hope we will in our dialogue in, what is that, Megan? January 26th? We'll be back.
I think that's the date.
You're stuck with us again.
So we have a few questions in the chat. The first is from Becky Moore. She says, this is a superb example of the benefits of multisensory learning in 2 of the 5 modalities, hearing and visualization, something proven effective in speaking needs learning. My question is, has this approach been tested on university level environmental science students to see how it has improved learning and innovative thinking?
So we are actually targeting a different audience, and that's middle school kids. And one of the offshoots of this is an education program. We're a greening STEM program, and we're just going into an agreement with the South Carolina Commission for the Blind. So we're developing middle school programs that are combining regular, more traditional science approaches with art and music, allowing the students to understand the data in those different modalities. So we have 4 lesson plans that are up on the website right now. We have another 2 planned. We've piloted them informally in a couple of classrooms, but we're piloting them in 2 school districts this winter, spring, one a rural school district and one an urban district here in New Hampshire, to really ask those questions. Does it work? And I'm not sure it will. This we could fail epically in this. On the other hand, if we succeed, right, and perhaps we could capture the interest of those students who might not identify as STEM learners, right? They might identify as artists or musicians, and they might tune out, right, in a typical science lesson, but now they can join in and they can do a great job. The other group that we're working with is students with visual impairments. The amazing thing about the sonification is it's an authentic translation of the data. So if you listen in, you know exactly what's going on. And so we're working with the South Carolina School for the Deaf and the Blind and the South Carolina Commission for the Blind, introducing these programs into after school, weekend, and summer teen programs. So all very new. We have some amazing teachers that we're working with, and we're looking to do this as a National Science Foundation grant to formalize how we would evaluate this. So I think it's a really exciting frontier. Like I said, it could be an epic failure, but I think it has a lot of potential.
And so Becky sent a follow-up about how, if you could expand a little more on how you'll assess the learning.
Hopefully we'll get a good evaluator. I'm a scientist, not an evaluator, but the folks that I've talked about is, talking to the we believe the teachers, right, for middle school is how we actually already have a questionnaire out, that we're having teachers review the lesson plans both before they've taught it and then after, and a series of questions of how appropriate they are, for the classroom, how they resonate with the students. We haven't gotten to the point of doing pre-tests or post-tests. I think that would be part of the I-test proposal for the National Science Foundation to fill that out. But for now, we're working with the teachers to get their feedback on how well this is working. I would love it if someone knows a good evaluator who could help us out with this.
Thanks, Lindsey. So Marcia had a question. Has any of the art and science combined data been used in policy discussions and led to discussions that have changed minds? So rather than the classroom, thinking about more kind of civic conversation.
That again is a really great question. The only thing I can say there is we've had great reception, so to speak, at the art festivals we've been at. We've been invited to participate in art science sessions at professional society meetings, at educational conferences. Sometimes you never know who's in the room, right? And sometimes it just takes that one person to change a mind, but I don't know, how you would evaluate. So no, we haven't gone in front of, town committees or, policy related groups.
Yet.
Although I will tell you one story. This isn't really related, but so I have a citizen science project at a lake in northern Maine where we have a camp, and it's a dam controlled lake. And so the water goes up and down, right, depending on whether they're letting out. And there's been a huge feud over the last 50 years on whether the water should be up or down, and whether anybody's, letting more water out or holding blah, blah, blah. So I put a sensor in because of course I did. And then I had and then, you'd have these meetings and everybody going, talking and pointing fingers. And then I was able to bring up the data, but then Marty sonified the data, and that stopped him short in the meeting as I filled the room, with the sound of the lake level, going up and down, over time based on the data. So I don't know if that changed any minds or whether it just made them mad at me, but it was one way to share our data.
Well, that sort of leads us into Autumn's question. She said, "Do you know how are the specific instruments chosen? Like, can you talk a little bit about that kind of correlation process with Marty?"
Yeah, that is Marty's genius. And that's where I started this. Remember, I said, I love music, but I'm not a musician. So that was his art. That was his music of making those choices. Now, we've had a lot of discussion over time that some of them are kind of hard to hear, and other people might have chosen something different or maybe something less complex. So we can change that over time and make different versions. I have to tell you another story. I have a teacher, again, South Carolina. This is a long story about why we're working in South Carolina, but that's okay. Who is a teacher for the visually, a TVI teacher for the visually impaired. And she was doing the water biz lessons, one-on-one with her students. And she had one 8th grade boy who was adamant he wanted to talk to me and Marty. And so we got on a Zoom meeting, and he went on, a visually impaired child, went on to lecture Marty on the choice of instruments and suggest other instruments that would have been better. So, this is one version. We have the code, right? So we could, recode it, or we could put it out there for a hackathon and let other people recode it. Or we could, if we have a little bit more money, we could make a little, thing online that people could do their own. Wouldn't that be kind of fun? I can't even imagine how bad mine would sound, but still would be mine.
Thanks, Lindsey. Let's see. So there's some great comments about people are excited to see about the because are the curricula on the WaterViz site? There's like a section with them there, right? Yeah.
Yes,
so
there is on the far right, learning tools, I believe.
Great.
Education tools, learning tools, they are there.
Okay, I thought so. And let's see.
And I'm going to say one other thing. If anybody here is a teacher or knows teachers, we actually have stipends available if teachers want to review the lesson plans and fill out our questionnaire so we can get feedback for these. So put a pin in that and contact me if anybody wants to do that review.
Oh, and I'm going to jump down to a question from Becky just asked if you could talk a little bit more about the grants you've gotten to support this. So a little bit about where you've been able to find funding for the project.
Yeah, so it's been a project of love for a lot of people. We started back in 2013, 2014 by hook or by crook. We had this idea. We had Xavier, we had Marty, we had and we just were trying to get the back end, right? So we could get the data from the sensors and connect it to an instrument and then get it online and make it animate this thing. And you should see some of the early versions. They look like the Very Hungry Caterpillar. They were kind of crazy, but we were so excited because we got them to work. But then we were able to take that and get a National Science Foundation oh gosh, it's too late in the day, an eager grant. So $300,000 we got to further this investigation, working at the forefront of the art and brain and environmental science. So we had different directorates, and that really, really jump-started us. I also want to say a big thank you to the Forest Service, for supporting, my time and other people's time, as well as in some of the early days, providing some funding for this. So it's been a patchwork, but we do have some ideas where we would like to go, particularly with the educational side, to an eye test it at NSF. Other ideas are welcome, and we'd love to work with other groups, organizations, foundations.
Thanks, Lindsay. In the chat, there's definitely some interest in a hackathon for the music side of things, and and some interest in reinterpreting the data musically. Emily put a note about that. And
I just have to say, because I always have another story. I do have a story. Two weekends ago, right? My adult son, who's 26, he's out in San Francisco, and he is, of course, a software engineer. And for fun on the weekend, he participated in a hackathon, and he and his buddies, they came in second and blah, blah, blah. But while they were there, and this is a hackathon in San Francisco with thousands of people from all over the world, there was a big discussion on doing real-time data sonifications and visualizations. And he was able to pull up the water biz, and all these super nerdy, super smart folks are like, oh, that's cool. We want to try that. So I think we're ripe for joining a hackathon. Maybe we'll get a prize. We can plow that back into the project.
That sounds great. Well, keep us all posted if that happens. I'll share that with the museum community for sure. Well, thanks. It's just about 8 o'clock, and I want to be sort of mindful of everyone's time. But I do want, let's see if I can get this chat lined up right. If you're interested in, well, first of all, you should come on Saturday. It's going to be amazing. The dust has not settled quite yet, but by Saturday at 4, actually by Saturday at 11, when we open for the day, it will all be together and look great. So that the exhibition will be open till through February, as Lindsay said. And then on January, I had the date in front of me, 19th, I think it's a Thursday. Peter Groffman, who's one of the scientists who's been involved with research at Hubbard Brook, is going to give our next Mountain Voices lecture. I've just put the registration link in the chat there. And then in February, the third Thursday in February, Eric Kelsey, who we heard a little bit about earlier, will be giving a Mountain Voices lecture on his research with Plymouth students working at Hubbard Brook and thinking about some of what Lindsay's been talking about, and then also thinking about thermal inversions in the valley and the work he did with Plymouth students there. And that, I think that one's in March, and in February, I'm hoping to confirm the date still, that Scott Bailey is going to talk with us about his research at Hubbard Brook. So this winter we'll have lots of opportunities to learn more. And if you come to the exhibition, you'll see the work of Rebecca Schultz, who worked closely with Scott Bailey and Jenny Bauer, a PhD student on geology, and so some of actually, you can get a little preview here. On my desk, I have, this is the BS Soil Horizon. So Scott brought these by for me the other day. They're getting ready to go into the exhibition as a complement to some of Rebecca's new work. So there'll be lots of opportunities this winter to learn more about Hubbard Brook and about the art science program. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope to see many of you on Saturday, if not in the winter sometime. So yes, thank you, Lindsay. It's great to have you join us, and yeah, have a nice evening, everyone.
Thanks everybody for coming out.